So within my practice, it's predominantly based in portraiture and self-portraiture, and within the images, I look at identity and the self, and how one kind of constructs our sense of self, and looking at that specifically through like lineage, history, and culture. When I'm first thinking about the images and the ideas, I kind of narrow in like very personally and think about questions that I think about when it comes to who I am and my culture and what makes up who I am. And so my heritage is a big part of that. I come from mixed cultural heritage, so I'm nêhiyawak or Plains Cree from Red Pheasant First Nation in Saskatchewan, and I'm also a member of the Siksika First Nation or Blackfoot First Nation in Alberta. And that's on my father's side, and then on my mother's side I have British and Dutch ancestry. And so that's always been that kind of knowledge of coming from these two very different and at times conflicting cultures has been something that has consumed my thoughts and questions of who I am from a very, very young age, trying to understand myself and trying to learn and belong, feeling like a belonging to both these sides of myself. And so it kind of naturally became questions that I started to explore early on in my images when I was in university, because as I was trying to find my voice, I was trying to think of things that I was that I guess I was passionate about or interested in, or that I could speak to myself, that were kind of somewhat familiar. And so looking at how being part of this intercultural kind of experience, and how these two cultures sometimes collide, but also how they mix creatively, I thought could be an interesting kind of jumping off point within my images. But at the same time, hopefully talking also broadly about these specific topics. So so within my work, how I work currently is I do mostly take self-portraits. I'm working within the landscape, and the works that you see within this exhibition kind of go a bit further in terms of working with site-specific locations that have direct family connections, either to my Plains Cree ancestry or to my family that immigrated into Canada, as well as these landscapes also talk, kind of broadly to the history of what Canada, what the territory that we now call Canada, how it came about. So there's lots of different layers in terms of what I kind of weave into the works. So within the exhibition, there's two images that are somewhat separate from the other works. They're two images that I made in 2017, and they were taken at Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump in Alberta, which is kind of in the prairies in Canada. And I was drawn to this site because it has, it's culturally very significant to my indigenous, my First Nations ancestors. So this site for my indigenous ancestors was used as a hunting ground and gathering place. And so they, for 6,000 years, used this site as basically a way to drive the buffalo off the cliffs and hunt them. And they had this strategic way of doing that. And they hunted the bison for very sustainably for this amount of time. And they used all the parts of the animals, and it was their way of life, and it was very important to them. When settlers came, they observed the ways of hunting these bison, and they really wanted to exploit this way of hunting the bison. So unfortunately, they kind of took over this site and almost drove the bison to extinction. They overhunted them. So it was interesting, the history of this land, and so I had got the opportunity to go in and photograph there. And so within the other elements of the costume that I've kind of created, it references other animals that have been impacted by colonization or by our current human imprint on the land. So you'll see on the kind of the coat, the garment that I'm wearing, there's all these tracks, and they're tracks of the prairie chicken, which were kind of important animal that you see is represented within First Nations regalia and way of dancing. Unfortunately, the prairie chicken has been kind of extinct in this area of Canada because of industrialized farming. But we use their way of movements is used within some of the male dancing, powwow dancing dances, and then the bird also kind of in their mating dances gets this kind of feather bustle that forms. And so, also again in the regalia, some of the men wear these really beautiful bustles on their back, and that's kind of represented a little bit in the headpiece that I'm wearing, kind of this fanning of feathers. And then in there's a reference to the beaver in the top hat that I'm wearing. This was another main drive for Europeans to come into Canada to basically hunt this sought-after beaver pelts to make these fashionable top hats back in Europe. And again, this was also caused the beaver to almost go extinct within Canada. So there's little elements within every bit of the costume or the landscape that kind of reference this interactions with human and animals kind of within the image. I do use water within the images. I think that kind of comes back when I was younger. In 16 and 17, I got the opportunity to do a remote camping trip in northern Quebec, and it was a whitewater canoe trip, and it was a 30-day long excursion, and you're basically you're with 10 other similar aged youth and 2 kind of adult instructors, and you're reading off of topographic maps, and you really have no forms of comfort that you're used to in the city, and you're really learning to read the land and in this 30-day time. And so it was a new experience for me to do whitewater canoeing, and I think it was a very impactful trip for me. It was a very transformational time, and I think I just became very close with my relationship with water, and that connection and that memory from when I was a teenager. And so I think it kind of subconsciously shows up in my work in different ways. I also, there's also, lots of kind of metaphors that water has, when it comes to thinking about my 2, different cultures. It's kind of powerful enough to create like gorges and canyons, but it also kind of follows it follows different directions, and then it also just has this these representations of travel ways and of my European ancestors traveling by boat into this other territory, and of exploration as well. So there's just, I guess, lots of connections that I think about when it comes to water in my work. So.